long as I can remember, there have really been two big influences in my life: technology and theater. Now, I've spent the last 8 years living in Silicon Valley. 6 of those I spent working alongside my brother and so many amazing people at Facebook. It was incredible to have a front row seat for social media and the rise of such innovation in Silicon Valley. But I had a life before Silicon Valley and Facebook and technology, as shocking as that may sound. You know, when I was a little girl, my dream wasn't to be a power player in the digital ecosystem or to have conversations about social, local, mobile while also trying to keep a straight face. My dream was to sing and dance on Broadway. My dream was to get up on a stage and make a fool of myself in front of millions of people. And if you ask the tech press, they'd probably say I still do all of those things. But really, I've had theater in my blood as long as I can remember. In fact, it all started when I was cast in the lead role in 42nd Street as Peggy Sawyer when I was 13 years old at Horace Mann School right here in New York. I fell in love with Broadway then. The tap dancing, the big costumes, the music, it was incredible. In fact, my instant messenger, my AOL screen name today is still Peggy 42nd Street. And if only they had iPhones and Instagram back then. My dad sat in the audience and took 5 rolls of film. And I remember sitting and waiting eager anticipation for the film to be developed back from CVS 2 weeks later, only to find that every photo was blurry. Every single one. This is the best of all the photos he took. That would never have happened now with iPhones and Instagram. Now, I went on to do a lot of theater in high school, in college. I studied classical music and opera. I sang in an a cappella group. I even thought about becoming a cantor. And then 2004 happened and my brother started Facebook. I joined in 2005, and the rest is history from there. But when I started thinking about what life after Facebook might look like for me, I really started going back to art, to theater, to content. Sitting where I was sitting in Silicon Valley, it seemed like those two worlds were such polar opposite. But when I thought about it, I really thought, you know, what is technology without the art, without the content that goes into it? And so the more I thought about it, the more I realized that technology and theater are really two sides of the same coin, and that together, connected, they're both better. Now, we live in this incredibly connected world. There are 2 billion people who are online with internet access. By the end of this decade alone, there will be 5 billion people. 5 billion have mobile phones. Now, when you think about the incredible percentage of the global population that is, it's mind-blowing. 1 billion of those are smartphones. And we now have the access to be connected literally anywhere. You can check in on Facebook from the top of Mount Everest, or astronauts can tweet from outer space. And now for a lot of the engineers that I work with in Silicon Valley, that's it. That's the end, because connecting people equals information, and information equals big data, and you put big data in the cloud, and that's it, folks. We can all go home. And I just used every internet buzzword in one slide, so yay. But when you think about it, technology alone doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really change anything at all. You need the theater, you need the art, you need the content, or as George Takei put it, you need the cat videos in order to make this a world worth connecting with technology. Now, Robert Wilson in 1969 went before Congress asking for millions of dollars to fund a particle accelerator, and they said, well, millions of dollars, what does this have to do with defending our country? He said nothing. It has nothing to do except to make our country worth defending. And that's really, I think, the role that theater plays in technology. While it doesn't directly connect people, it makes it a world worth connecting through technology. And that's why I'm excited to be here speaking to you guys today. Now, I've learned so much today just from hearing so many of the speakers that came before. Now, the great news is that the business of Broadway seems to be booming. You have 5x more money coming into Broadway and 3 times as many productions every year. The bad news, though, is that the audiences have less than doubled. Now, you are seeing 300% increases in foreign audiences coming into Broadway, but that still isn't catching up with the dollars. And so we also talked about a lot of the limitations. You've heard about the limitations of physical space in the theater. Even the best theater that is sold out every single night with a touring company touring at the same time, you can maybe have about 1.6 million people see the show in a year. At the same time, a mediocre movie at the box office, like Saw 18, will do that same number on its opening night. Now, let's say you don't even have the limitation of physical space. We also talked today about the limitation of pricing and budget. In 1946, you could go see a Broadway show for $4. Even adjusted for inflation, today's prices are more than 3 times that, $80 to $100 for a nosebleed ticket in the back of the room, even with those sidelines, another word, sightlines, that I learned today. Now, if you are a family of 4 going to take your family to a theater, you could be spending up to 2 monthly car payments just to see a show alone. If you wait in the TKTS freezing line, which I have done many times in my life, you can get that down to 1 car payment. But it's still not enough. But let's say we take away the limitation of physical space and we take away the price. We also talked today about a limitation in innovation. Because as Broadway becomes more and more of a business, as Terry talked about earlier today, there's less risk-taking. It's harder to convince people to take a gamble, and so you see the same shows created again and again. In fact, if you took someone from the 1870 production of HMS Pinafore and put them in a Broadway theater today, they would have an almost identical experience to what they had. Now, some people might say, that's great, that's fine, Broadway should be exclusive and special. And you know what? The fact that Broadway even exists at all in a world of unlimited entertainment should say enough to all of us. So maybe the reason the experience is the same from 1870 to now is because it's the best experience. And so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But that's not the Broadway I know. The Broadway I know, the New York City I grew up in, the people who I grew up who are going to Broadway now, are some of the most creative, most innovative people in the world. The kind of people who are so passionate about what they want and what they love that they'll literally show up in New York with nothing but a dream to have something to do with Broadway. And so I think saying that Broadway shouldn't change, should stay the way it is, it doesn't do it justice, and I don't think any of us here believe it. So in a world where you can get literally any movie to your computer in a moment, any book to your tablet in a moment, why should Broadway be limited by physical space, by ticket prices, by the same shows over and over? Now, I want to throw out to you today 10 ideas. There are thousands of ideas for how we can use technology and social media to really bring Broadway to those 2 billion people who are online. But here's 10 that I just want to throw out to you quickly today. A lot of these have actually been covered by a lot of speakers along the way, so I'm very excited to build on what they've had to say. Number 1, open auditions on YouTube. Crazy, I know. I'm not saying you should cast your entire show from YouTube or the leads, but why don't consider picking a few small parts, a chorus part, or a small speaking role, and opening it up to millions of people around the world. I know as a young girl, I would have died for the opportunity to send in a video and be considered for a part on Broadway. The other great thing about doing this is that you can actually see who gets a lot of view counts through their videos. You could actually see who's going to bring an audience with them. Look at some of those stats on global audiences coming to Broadway and actually see what countries you can cast from that will be better. Who knows? Has it ever been that a bit part made a difference in the box office? Think about what a completely mobile playbill looks like. Now, the playbill that I remember is something that you thumb through when you've run out of conversation topics with the people next to you, and those awkward 10 minutes before the show starts when you're already in your seat. But imagine if the playbill stayed with you for months or years after you left, if it was constantly changing, if it was fluid up until the moment the performers took the stage, and if for months after you left the theater, you could stay in tune with updates on your show or the next show that was coming into that theater. Crowdsourcing. Again, one of the huge buzzwords we talk about in Silicon Valley, but crowdsourcing and crowdfunding are huge trends that we're starting to see. Now, if you can take just a little piece of a show, costumes, or a little piece of set design, or a dance move here or there, and actually open it up to being crowdsourced by your audience, that makes people feel like they have a pride and ownership in the show, even if they're not sitting there in the theater, and you can get millions of people to talk about your show on your behalf. Crowdfunding as well is very interesting. Last year, more artistic projects were funded through Kickstarter than through the National Endowment of the Arts. Combating pricey tickets with online viewing options. I know the speech right before me was all about this, which is exciting, but this is something we have to do something about this. Imagine if on select nights you could live stream your shows online so that that family in the middle of the country or around the world could view the Broadway show from their living room for a really small price and have that same experience. Now, I'm not saying to get rid of the premier in-theater pricey options. There are always people who are willing to pay a premium for that amazing experience of sitting in a majestic theater with the world's best talent in front of them. But just giving more people viewing options. And you could even monetize the live stream with ads and merchandising. As a Facebook person, don't turn up your nose at online ads, they work. Partnering with local businesses to expand audiences. We've heard from some great businesses in the neighborhood of Broadway. Broadway isn't just the theaters, it's everything that surrounds it. So why not consider partnering with some of the local businesses to create kind of a social media hashtag for a whole day or a whole evening experience that businesses can share to promote and expand on each other's social media presences. Following along with your favorite show from home, what if you put someone backstage whose entire job was to live tweet the show every night? Now, when I was younger, my favorite thing to do with my friends was to put on a soundtrack and literally sing the entire thing from start to finish, much to the amusement of my brothers and sisters and my parents. But imagine if you had someone live tweeting the lyrics to a show such that that young girl in the middle of the country could actually sing along to her favorite Broadway show from home while it was happening on stage. People always ask me if I can do one thing on social media, what would it be? And I always talk about photos. Photos are the #1 thing you can do for more engagement. They need no translation. Anyone can understand it no matter what language they're viewing in. So start thinking about creative things you can do with photos. Anything from putting a photo booth in the lobby during intermission to, as crazy as it sounds, having people at curtain call take a photo of the audience and actually ask people to go onto Facebook and tag themselves in it the next day to drive viral distribution. Social media walk-on roles. This is one of my personal favorites because I actually got to have my own Broadway debut 2 weeks ago when I had a walk-on role in the Anything Goes touring production in San Francisco. Now, it was literally a walk-on role. I walked across the stage, and then I was done and went into the audience. But it was a win-win for both me and for the performance. Now, for me, that's not an experience I've ever had before, and so I tweeted up a storm, I Facebooked it, which made it a win for the theater too, because that show, even if it sold every seat, 70,000 people maximum would see it. More than 70,000 people saw the social media impressions generated from that walk-on role. Now, think about for your shows, Think about who are the influencers in your communities who you could make feel a little special and invite them to do things like that. Now with tools like Clout, we can actually see who are the most influential fans in some of our networks that we can invite to help do some marketing on our behalf. We often joke that the @reply is the new autograph. Now, I remember a lot of times young waiting outside the stage door for that lead actor to sign my playbill. But now, instead of those 8 or 9 young kids outside the playbill, you can interact with thousands of fans. You can interact with anyone who's talking about the show around the world that evening. And finally, anything you can do to make your fans stars. Now, we live in this world where when someone's buying a ticket to your show, if you have them authenticate in with Facebook, with Twitter, with a login, you can learn so much information about them. The coolest thing that ever happened to me customer service-wise was I went to a hotel, and when I got to my room, there was a picture of my son already framed by the bed, and a picture of me and my husband just from doing a Google Images search. Now imagine the things you could do knowing about the people sitting in your audience and what you could do. So making your fans stars, and I guess that was funny, thank you. Anyway, I want to thank you guys all so much. Some of the ideas will happen, many of them won't, but the Broadway that I know has changed so much. It's gone from ballad operas to funk. It's gone from sailors to Mormons. And instead of having just a small sliver of the world come to Broadway, why not bring a small piece of Broadway to the entire world? Thank you.